There are books that one does not merely read, but experiences. Books that become invisible architects of destinies, changing minds and, subsequently, the reality of millions. And among such monumental works there is one whose history is as paradoxical as it is profound. A work that appeared at the dawn of the 20th century, anticipating many discoveries of modern psychology and neuroscience, yet whose fate was marked by an extraordinary prohibition. In 1933, at the peak of the Great Depression, when hope seemed a luxury and despair a ubiquitous companion, copies of this book, which promised keys to prosperity and inner power, were seized, not because of heresy, not because of political dissent, but because of something far more subtle and, perhaps more unsettling to established paradigms. This book gave too much power to the reader. It taught him to control his mind, his world, his destiny. The Master Key System by Charles Francis Haanel is not just a set of instructions, it is a philosophy, a method, a path that illuminated the way for such giants of thought and action as Napoleon Hill, who inspired a whole generation to seek wealth of thought, not just material possessions, Earl Nightingale, whose voice became synonymous with personal development, and even Oprah Winfrey, whose empire is built on principles of self-knowledge and empowerment. Today we will unveil one of the most powerful and, perhaps most underestimated chapters of this monumental work, the 17th lesson, which offers us a radically new perspective on combating inner demons. To understand the depth of Charles Haanel's teaching, one must first look at the man who created it. Charles Francis Haanel was born on May 22, 1866 in St. Louis, Missouri, a city that at the time was a living symbol of American entrepreneurship and industrial growth. His childhood passed in an era of rapid change, when the United States was experiencing unprecedented economic boom, shaping the future of the world. Haanel was not a cloistered academic or a detached philosopher. He was a man of action, deeply immersed in the world of business and commerce. His path to success began not with theory, but with practice. From a young age, he demonstrated exceptional business acumen and the ability to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. He began his career as an office worker, but quickly rose through the ranks, mastering the intricacies of trade and management. By the early 20th century, Charles Haanel was already a recognized magnate, founder and president of several large companies. His main creation was the Continental Commercial Company, a powerful corporation engaged in real estate, mining, and manufacturing. His business empire spanned vast territories, and his name became synonymous with business success and financial acumen. He was a man who did not just dream of wealth, but methodically built it, brick by brick, using the principles he would later articulate in his book. He was not an esotericist detached from reality. On the contrary, his approach was deeply pragmatic. Haanel saw that success in business, as in life, was not solely about hard work or luck. It depended on one's mindset, on an inner attitude, on a person's ability to shape their reality through the conscious use of mental laws. He observed how some people, seemingly with equal opportunities, achieved greatness, while others remained stagnant, and he concluded that the difference lay not in external circumstances, but in a person's inner world. It was this practical experience, multiplied by a deep interest in metaphysics, psychology, and philosophy, that led Haanel to create the Master Key System. He did not just read books, he experimented, tested theories in practice, observing how certain mental attitudes and methods of thinking affected real results in business and personal life. In 1912, when the world stood on the brink of the First World War, Haanel began publishing his work. Initially, it was a 24-week course mailed to subscribers. Each week, clients received a new lesson that they were to study and apply in practice. Among his clients were not only ordinary people seeking paths to self-improvement, but also influential industrialists, businessmen, and executives who recognized that extraordinary results required extraordinary methods of thinking. They understood that mental preparation, discipline of the mind, and the ability to visualize success were as important assets as capital and production capacity. Haanel offered them not just motivation, but a clear, step-by-step system based on universal laws that, he believed, governed both the material and mental worlds. His course became the answer to this challenge, a systematized guide to developing mental power, which, in his opinion, is the true source of all achievements. His teaching quickly gained popularity, spreading by word of mouth among the elite of American business. People who had already achieved much sought something more, a key to sustainable success, to inner balance, to the ability to overcome any crisis. And Haanel, a man who himself had risen from a humble clerk to an industrial magnate, offered them this key, based on a deep understanding of the human mind and its limitless potential. He believed that every person possesses the ability for self-realization and that the master key system is merely a tool to help unlock this inherent power. In the boundless ocean of human experience, there are currents that carry us to the shore of prosperity and currents that drag us to the reefs of despair. And often, unconsciously, we ourselves choose the direction, focusing our attention on what we wish to avoid rather than on what we desire to achieve. It is this paradox, this fundamental misconception of the human mind, that Charles Haanel addresses in his 17th lesson of the Master Key System. He asserts that direct conflict with the negative is a path to its amplification, not its elimination. The method of substitution, Haanel writes, is the only way to freedom. Direct struggle feeds that which you struggle against. This statement, seemingly so simple, actually overturns the conventional understanding of overcoming difficulties. We are accustomed to fighting problems, eradicating flaws, suppressing fears. But Haanel proposes a different approach, not struggle, but transformation through substitution. Imagine a garden. If you try to get rid of weeds simply by pulling them out, they will inevitably grow back, often with renewed vigor. But if instead you actively plant and cultivate beautiful flowers, useful plants, then the weeds will simply have no space, not enough light and nutrients. They will disappear on their own, displaced by the strength and beauty of what you create. This image is the metaphor of the 17th lesson. Haanel teaches us not to fight fear, but to focus on courage, not to suppress lack, but to focus on abundance. Not to treat illness as something separate and hostile, but to focus on health as a natural, ideal state. The key idea is to always focus on the ideal as an already existing fact. This is not just positive thinking, it is active mental construction of desired reality, in which negativity is deprived of its energy and its place in your consciousness. What does it mean to focus on the ideal as an already existing fact? It is not merely empty dreaming or naive optimism. It is a deep mental exercise requiring discipline and faith in the potential of one's own mind. Haanel urges us to use the power of visualization and feeling. If you want to be courageous, you do not simply tell yourself, "I am not afraid." You imagine yourself in a situation requiring courage, and you feel that quality in every cell of your body. You see yourself acting boldly, making decisions without hesitation, facing challenges with confidence. You live this ideal as if it were already your reality, here and now. Why is this so important? Why does direct struggle only feed that which we struggle against? Modern science, a century after the publication of the Master Key System, is beginning to provide answers to this question. In 1987, at Harvard University, psychologist Daniel Wegner conducted a famous experiment that went down in history as "Don't think of a white bear." Participants in the study were asked to think of anything but a white bear. The results were astonishing. The harder people tried to suppress the thought of a white bear, the more frequently and intrusively it returned. Wegner called this the ironic process theory, formulating the key conclusion: a suppressed thought becomes obsessive. This experiment brilliantly confirmed Haanel's intuition. When you actively fight fear, you are essentially constantly thinking about fear. You give it energy, you keep it at the center of your attention. Your brain, not distinguishing between positive and negative commands, simply registers fear, focus on fear, and as a result produces even more thoughts and feelings associated with fear. Similarly, when you fight lack, you focus on its absence, on scarcity, thereby strengthening thought patterns leading to deficiency. Direct struggle with negativity, on the contrary, only strengthens these undesirable neural pathways. Imagine trying not to think of a red button. Your brain is forced to constantly monitor, am I thinking of a red button? No? Good? Now? No? Good? This process itself requires energy and constantly brings the object you are trying to avoid back into your consciousness. It is like trying to put out a fire by constantly throwing wood into it, and then wondering why it does not go out. Haanel's method proposes simply removing the wood and starting to throw something else, water or sand, that is, focusing on the opposite, desired state. This approach is rooted in the understanding that our brain does not always distinguish between real experience and vividly imagined experience. Neurobiologists such as Dr. Norman Deutsch, author of The Brain That Changes Itself, 2007, have shown that neural networks physically rewire themselves in response to our experience, both external and internal. This phenomenon is called neuroplasticity. When you constantly focus on fear, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with fear. When you actively and purposefully imagine courage, you begin to build and strengthen new neural pathways associated with this desired quality. You are literally reprogramming your brain. Haanel's lesson offers us a way to break this vicious circle. Instead of trying to drive the bear out of your head, you simply need to fill it with something else, something desirable, something positive, something that corresponds to the ideal state. If you are afraid, instead of analyzing fear, fighting it, imagining its consequences, you purposefully shift your attention to the image of courage. You visualize yourself as brave, feel this quality, live it. And as the image of courage becomes more vivid and real in your consciousness, fear, deprived of nourishment, gradually fades. This principle is also closely related to the concept of epigenetics, popularized by Dr. Bruce Lipton. Epigenetics studies how the environment, including our thoughts and beliefs, can influence the expression of our genes without changing the DNA itself. Our thoughts and emotions are not just abstract phenomena. They are powerful chemical signals that affect every cell in our body. When you experience fear, your body releases stress hormones that can suppress the immune system and cause inflammation. When you focus on courage and calmness, your body produces other chemicals that promote healing and balance. Thus, focusing on health as an already existing fact is not just a metaphor. It is a biologically substantiated mechanism of self-regulation and healing. This principle is also reflected in the research of Dr. Barbara Fredrickson from the University of North Carolina, who in 2001 developed the broaden and build theory. Her research showed that positive emotions do not just make us happier, they literally broaden our field of vision, our cognitive abilities, and available neural connections. When we experience joy, interest, satisfaction, our brain becomes more flexible, we see more solutions, we are open to new ideas. Negative emotions, on the contrary, narrow our consciousness, forcing us to focus on threat, on survival, limiting our possibilities and creativity. Fredrickson established that there is a certain ratio of positive to negative emotions that is the threshold of flourishing. This ratio is 3-to-1. For every negative emotion, there must be at least 3 positive ones for a person to not just survive, but to flourish, develop, and realize their potential. Haanel's teaching, with its emphasis on substituting negativity with positivity, is a direct, practical method for achieving this ratio. It teaches us to actively cultivate positive states, thereby broadening our possibilities and literally rebuilding our inner architecture. Haanel's ideas are not limited to abstract metaphors. They have formed the basis of many modern therapeutic approaches. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, developed by Dr. Aaron Beck in the 1960s, is one of the most effective and widely used methods of psychotherapy. And its central principle is surprisingly resonant with Haanel's 17th lesson. CBT works precisely by substituting so-called catastrophizing or irrational thoughts with more realistic, adaptive, and constructive ones. When a patient suffers from anxiety or depression, their mind often fixates on negative, distorted thoughts. The therapist's task is not simply to say, "Don't think about it." That would be equivalent to trying not to think of a white bear. Instead, the therapist helps the patient identify these negative patterns and actively replace them with alternative, more balanced and truthful interpretations of reality. For example, instead of the thought, "I am incapable of anything, I will never succeed," the patient learns to formulate, "Perhaps it is difficult, but I have resources, and I can try step by step." This is the classic method of substitution that Haanel proposed as a universal key to liberation. But before modern science and psychology could formulate these principles, the sages of antiquity had already grasped their essence. The method of substitution, or the transformation of negative states through the cultivation of their opposites, is a cornerstone of many spiritual and philosophical traditions of the world. The deep roots of the substitution method extend into humanity's most ancient teachings. In the Hermetic tradition attributed to the semi-mythical Hermes Trismegistus, there was a principle of polarity stating that everything has its opposite, and these opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. Heat and cold are merely different degrees of the same thing. Light and darkness are also. And likewise, love and hate, fear and courage. Hermeticism teaches that by changing the degree of one pole, we can transform it into another. This is the method of substitution, not destruction, but transformation through a change of focus and intensity. Take, for example, Sufism, the mystical current of Islam. Sufi practice is aimed at purifying the soul, or nafs, from vicious qualities and replacing them with virtues. Sufis distinguish several states of the nafs, from the lowest nafs al-ammara, the soul inciting to evil, to the highest nafs al-mutmainna, the serene soul. The path to serenity lies not in direct struggle with anger, envy, or pride, but in the active practice of patience, generosity, and humility. Through constant focus on virtue, vicious qualities gradually lose their power, displaced by the light of divine attributes. In Buddhism, especially in the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, it is recognized that suffering, dukkha, is part of human existence, but it is not inevitable. The path to liberation from suffering lies not in fighting it, but in understanding its causes and developing opposite states: compassion, wisdom, tranquility. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a garden. If you do not plant flowers, weeds will grow there. Therefore, it is necessary to actively cultivate positive mental states through meditation and mindfulness, substituting them for negative ones. Similar practices are found in the Christian tradition, particularly in the Jesuit spiritual exercises developed by St. Ignatius of Loyola. These exercises include meditations and contemplations aimed at self-knowledge and spiritual growth. One of the key principles is the substitution of a negative thought with its opposite. If a thought of doubt arises, it should be replaced by a thought of faith. If a temptation to judge appears, one should actively cultivate a thought of compassion and understanding. This is not just an attempt to ignore negativity, but a conscious and purposeful redirection of attention to a constructive, spiritually uplifting image. The Stoics, ancient Greek and Roman philosophers, offered their approach to managing emotions. They taught that we cannot control external events, but we can control our reaction to them. Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, all of them called for the development of an inner citadel, for accepting what is beyond our control, and for focusing on what is within, on our thoughts, judgments, and virtues. When confronted with fear, a Stoic does not fight it directly, but shifts attention to rational judgment, to the acceptance of the inevitable, to the development of inner serenity, ataraxia. This is also a form of substitution, replacing irrational fear with rational acceptance and calmness. Kabbalah, the mystical teaching of Judaism, also offers concepts resonant with the method of substitution. The Tree of Life, the central symbol of Kabbalah, consists of 10 sephirot, divine emanations that represent various aspects of reality and human consciousness. The path of spiritual growth in Kabbalah is a path of balancing and harmonizing these sephirot. If one sephira, for example, gevura, severity, judgment, manifests excessively, it leads to negative consequences. The task is to balance it with chesed, mercy, love, actively cultivating the opposite quality. This is a constant process of substituting disharmony with harmony, imbalance with equilibrium. In Hindu philosophy, especially in the Yoga Vasistha, one of the deepest texts on Advaita Vedanta, it is emphasized that the entire world is merely a projection of consciousness. Our fears, our desires, our illnesses, all are mental constructs. The path to liberation, moksha, lies in realizing this illusoriness and in actively shifting attention from temporary, transient phenomena to the eternal, immutable reality, Brahman. When the mind ceases to cling to negative mental formations and focuses on the true nature of being, suffering disappears on its own. This is the highest form of substitution, replacing illusion with truth. In the Buddhist tradition of Tibet, there is a powerful practice known as Tonglen. This is a meditation in which the practitioner breathes in the suffering of others, their pain, their fears, and breathes out liberation, healing, love, and compassion. At first glance, this seems paradoxical. Why breathe in suffering? But the essence is that it is active substitution. By breathing in negativity, you do not allow it to take root within. You transform it by passing it through your heart, filled with compassion, and breathe out already transformed, positive energy. This is the highest form of substitution, where you not only get rid of your own negativity, but actively transform it for the benefit of all beings. Zen Buddhism offers another vivid metaphor. Do not kill the dragon, feed the tiger. The dragon here symbolizes our fears, our vices, our negative aspects. We often try to kill them, suppress them, destroy them, but this only strengthens their resistance. The tiger, on the other hand, symbolizes our inner strength, our wisdom, our virtues. By feeding the tiger, that is, by developing our positive qualities, we deprive the dragon of energy. It does not disappear instantly, but gradually loses its power, becomes less threatening, because our inner strength grows and occupies more and more space. This is not a struggle, but a wise redistribution of energy. Thus, Charles Haanel may not have invented the method of substitution, but he systematized it and presented it in an accessible form, making it a practical tool for every person. He showed that these ancient wisdoms are not merely abstract philosophical concepts, but have direct, applied significance for our daily lives, for our health, our well-being, and our success. His 17th lesson is a call to conscious choice, to actively shaping one's inner world, to understanding that we are not victims of circumstances but architects of our reality. The practical value of Haanel's 17th lesson lies in its simplicity and universality. It does not require complex rituals or years of meditation, though it does not exclude them. It requires only awareness and discipline of the mind. Each time an undesirable state arises in your consciousness, fear, anxiety, anger, a feeling of lack, you make a conscious choice. You do not try to suppress it by force because you know that this will only strengthen it. You do not allow it to consume you. Instead, you actively and purposefully shift your attention to its opposite. If it is fear, you imagine and feel courage, calmness, confidence. If it is lack, you visualize abundance, prosperity, gratitude for what you already have and what you wish to attract. If it is illness, you focus on the image of perfect health, on the energy, on the vital force that flows in your body. This process requires practice. But each time you make this choice, you weaken the old neural connections associated with negativity and strengthen new ones associated with positivity. You are literally rebuilding your brain, creating a new mental architecture that will automatically support desired states. This is not just a change of thoughts. It is a change in the very way your mind interacts with reality. And this change, as we will see further, has profound and long-term consequences for your entire life. We have left you on the threshold of an astonishing discovery. Your mind does not merely react to reality, it shapes it. And Charles Haanel's 17th lesson is not just a philosophical concept, but a practical guide to this transformation. Today we will delve into how modern science confirms these ancient truths, how the wisdom of the ages echoes them, and how specific individuals who changed the world applied these principles in their lives. **** Modern science, rebuilding reality from within. In the 20th and 21st centuries, as humanity reached unprecedented heights in understanding the material world, we began to rediscover the power of the immaterial, the power of thought, consciousness, and intention. What Haanel described as rebuilding the mental architecture now has clear scientific justifications in fields such as neuroplasticity, epigenetics, psychoneuroimmunology, and the study of the placebo effect. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to physically change, reorganize its neural connections, and even create new neurons throughout life. For a long time, it was believed that the adult brain was static, its structure fixed after a certain age. However, revolutionary research, especially in the late 20th and early 21st century, completely refuted this dogma. Dr. Norman Doidge, in his book The Brain That Changes Itself, published in 2007, brought together decades of research demonstrating the brain's astonishing adaptability. He showed that our thoughts, our experiences, our habits, all literally rebuild our brain, shaping its physical structure. One of the most striking examples of neuroplasticity is the study conducted by Dr. Eleanor Maguire and her team in 2000. They studied the brains of London taxi drivers, known for their phenomenal knowledge of the intricate network of streets in the British capital. To obtain a license, taxi drivers must pass a rigorous exam, known as the Knowledge, which requires memorizing 25,000 streets and 20,000 landmarks. This learning process takes an average of 4 years. Dr. Maguire found that the posterior hippocampus, a brain region critically important for spatial memory and navigation, was significantly larger in experienced taxi drivers than in a control group. Moreover, the longer a person worked as a taxi driver, the larger this part of the hippocampus. This was direct physical evidence that intensive mental training literally changes the brain's structure. The brain does not just learn, it rebuilds itself to better perform the function on which you are focused. If you constantly focus on fear, your brain creates and strengthens neural pathways for fear. If you consciously switch to courage, to abundance, to health, you actively form new, more desirable pathways. You do not just change a thought, you change your brain. Moving from brain structure to its functions at the cellular level, we encounter epigenetics, the science that studies changes in gene expression that are not related to changes in the DNA sequence itself. In other words, epigenetics investigates how external factors, including our thoughts and emotions, can turn certain genes on or off, affecting our health and behavior. Dr. Bruce Lipton, a cell biologist and author of The Biology of Belief, became one of the pioneers in popularizing the idea that it is not genes that control our lives but our perception of the environment and our beliefs. He argues that a cell reacts not to reality as such but to our perception of reality, and this perception can change its genetic activity. A striking experiment published in 2014 by researchers Diaz and Ressler demonstrated how traumatic experiences can be transmitted across generations through epigenetic changes. Scientists trained mice to fear the smell of cherry blossoms, associating it with a mild electric shock. They then found that the offspring of these mice, never subjected to the shock, showed increased sensitivity and fear to the same smell. Moreover, this fear was transmitted to the second generation. Changes were found in the DNA of the sperm of males subjected to trauma, indicating epigenetic transmission of information. This experiment, though requiring further study and confirmation, vividly shows that our experiences, our fears, and even our beliefs can leave a trace that extends beyond our own lives. If negative states can be transmitted, it is logical to assume that positive, cultivated states can also have a profound impact on ourselves and on future generations, creating a more favorable internal environment. The connection between our mind and body is even more evident in the field of psychoneuroimmunology, the science that studies the interaction between mental processes, the nervous system, and the immune system. Candace Pert, a neuroscientist and pharmacologist, in her book Molecules of Emotion, published in 1997, presented a revolutionary concept that emotions are not just abstract feelings, but biochemical substances, or peptides, that act as informational molecules. These molecules circulate throughout the body, binding to receptors on the surface of cells and transmitting messages that affect all physiological processes, including the functioning of the immune system. Our body, in essence, is a living network where thoughts and emotions constantly exchange information with every cell. Studies conducted by Drs. Janice Glazer and Ronald Kiecolt Glazer showed how stress and negative emotions directly suppress the immune system. In one of their famous studies, they observed medical students during exam periods. It was found that during stress, students had significantly reduced activity levels of natural killer cells, which play a key role in fighting viruses and cancer cells, and also had increased wound healing time. These results convincingly demonstrate that chronic stress and negative states do not just cause discomfort, but also physically weaken our body, making it more vulnerable to diseases. Conversely, cultivating positive emotions and states through the method of substitution proposed by Haanel can strengthen immunity and promote overall healing. And finally, the pinnacle of the mind's power over the body is the placebo effect. This is a phenomenon in which a patient's physical or psychological condition improves after receiving an inactive substance or undergoing a sham procedure, solely due to their belief in the treatment's effectiveness. Dr. Henry K. Beecher, an anesthesiologist at Harvard Medical School, in his landmark 1955 work, analyzed 15 clinical studies and concluded that the placebo effect is observed in 30 to 60% of patients suffering from various diseases, including pain, nausea, and anxiety. This means that 30 to 60% of people can experience real physical relief or healing simply because they believe they are receiving effective treatment, even if it is just a sugar pill. The placebo effect is not just an imagined improvement. It causes real physiological changes in the body, such as the release of endorphins, changes in brain activity, and even a reduction in inflammation. It demonstrates that our belief in healing or success, can trigger powerful internal mechanisms of self-regulation and self-restoration. Haanel's method of substitution is, in essence, the conscious application of the placebo principle to our lives as a whole. Instead of focusing on illness, you focus on perfect health. Instead of lack, on abundance. You create in your consciousness a mental equivalent of the desired state, and your body, your mind, your reality begin to react to this inner image, striving to bring the external into conformity with the internal. This is not magic, this is the science of how consciousness shapes matter. Asterisk, asterisk, ancient parallels, the eternal wisdom of transformation. Asterisk, asterisk, the idea that our inner world shapes our outer reality is not a new discovery of the 20th century. It permeates ancient philosophical and spiritual traditions worldwide, proving the universality of the principles that Haanel systematized in his work. These ancient teachings, like lighthouses, pointed the way to inner transformation long before the advent of modern science. Let's start with Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary sage whose teachings formed the basis of Hermeticism, an esoteric tradition that originated in Egypt during the Hellenistic period. One of the central principles of Hermeticism, set forth in texts such as the Poimandres, states, "As above, so below, as within, so without." This principle means that the macrocosm, the universe, is reflected in the microcosm, man, and that our inner world of consciousness is a mirror and a formative principle of our outer reality. Hermeticists believed that the human mind possesses divine creative power, and that by controlling one's thoughts and focus, one can influence one's destiny. The Poimandres, the divine mind, instructs Hermes that man, possessing reason, can rise above the material world if he focuses his attention on truth and the divine. This is a direct echo of the method of substitution. If you are focused on the ideal, you rise above limitations. Let us turn to the East, to the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, who lived in the 6th century BCE. At the very beginning of the Dhammapada, one of the key texts of the Pali Canon, the Buddha proclaims, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world." This statement is the cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy and practice. The Buddha taught that all suffering and joy originate in the mind, and that changing the mind is the only path to liberation. He did not advocate fighting negative thoughts directly, but developing opposite positive qualities, compassion instead of hatred, generosity instead of greed. This is a pure embodiment of the method of substitution, not fighting darkness, but lighting a lamp. Furthermore, in the ancient Indian tradition, we find the Yoga Vasista, a monumental Sanskrit text dated approximately to the 6th–14th centuries CE, which is considered one of the most comprehensive guides to Advaita Vedanta. This text is a dialogue between the sage Vasista and Prince Rama, in which Vasista explains the nature of consciousness, reality, and liberation. The Yoga Vasista states that the entire world is merely a manifestation of the mind, and that our experience is the result of our own mental projections, or sankalpas. The text teaches that if the mind is capable of creating illusory worlds, it is also capable of creating desired reality. It emphasizes the importance of vikalpatyaga*, the abandonment of negative or limiting mental concepts, and sankalpasiddhi*, the fulfillment of desired intentions through focused attention. This is a profound teaching on how to consciously shape one's reality, letting go of what does not serve, and cultivating what leads to well-being. The Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah also contains an understanding of the power of thought and intention. Kabbalah describes the Ein Sof, the infinite, limitless divine being, from which the entire world emanates through the 10 Sepharut, or divine attributes. Man, created in the image and likeness of God, possesses the ability to influence these emanations through his thoughts, words, and actions. Kabbalistic practice focuses on meditation and visualization to attract divine qualities and abundance into one's life. The idea that our thoughts and intentions not only influence us but also interact with divine energies shaping reality is a powerful parallel to Haanel's method. By focusing on the ideal, we are in essence connecting to the source of all being, to the Ein Sof, and allowing its limitless possibilities to manifest in our lives. Returning to the West, let us turn to the Stoics, a philosophical school that flourished in ancient Greece and Rome. Thinkers such as Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius taught that we cannot control external events, but we can always control our reaction to them. Epictetus, a former slave, proclaimed it is not things themselves that disturb men, but their judgments about these things. He taught that the key to tranquility and happiness lies in distinguishing what is within our control, our thoughts, judgments, desires, and what is not, external events. Instead of fighting external difficulties, the Stoics advocated for inner work, for changing one's attitude and perception. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, in his meditations constantly reminded himself of the need to maintain inner calm and virtue, regardless of external circumstances. This is a classic example of the method of substitution, not fighting external negativity, but replacing the internal reaction to it, focusing on wisdom, calmness, and virtue. And finally, Zen Buddhism, which came from China to Japan, offers its unique approach to the transformation of consciousness. Bodhidharma, the legendary patriarch who brought Zen to China in the 5th century CE, emphasized the importance of direct experience and intuitive understanding, rather than intellectual concepts. In the Zen tradition, there is a wise saying, "Do not kill the dragon, feed the tiger." This metaphor perfectly illustrates the method of substitution. The dragon symbolizes our fears, our negative qualities, our inner demons. Trying to kill them is a direct struggle, which, as Haanel warned, only feeds that which you struggle against. Instead, Zen proposes to feed the tiger, that is, to focus on developing opposite positive qualities, courage, compassion, wisdom. When the tiger positivity becomes stronger, the dragon negativity naturally weakens and loses its power. This is not suppression but a reorientation of energy, a conscious cultivation of the desired. These ancient teachings, separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, unanimously point to the same truth. The power of transformation lies within us, in our mind. They are all in essence variations of the method of substitution, offering paths to liberation from suffering and to creating a life filled with meaning and well-being. Through the conscious management of one's inner state, stories of specific individuals, unlocking the key to success, the method of substitution, as we see, is not merely a theoretical concept. Its practical application has led to outstanding results in the lives of many people, some of whom have become true legends. Their stories serve as vivid proof of how conscious management of one's inner world can lead to unprecedented success and influence. One of the most striking examples is Earl Nightingale. Born into poverty in 1921, during the Great Depression, he faced all the hardships of that era. His father abandoned the family when Earl was only 6 years old, and he grew up in destitution, moving from city to city in search of work. It was during this time, at the age of 29, that Nightingale accidentally stumbled upon a book that changed his life, The Master Key System, by Charles Haanel. He was struck by the simplicity and depth of the principles outlined, especially the idea that we become what we think about most of the time. Nightingale began to apply these principles in his life, focusing on his desire to become successful and influential. In 1956, already a successful radio host and entrepreneur, Nightingale recorded a short audio message for his employees which he called The Strangest Secret. In this recording, he laid out the essence of what he had learned from Haanel and other thinkers. Success is not the result of luck or hard work, but a direct consequence of what we focus our attention on. He explained that most people spend their lives thinking about what they do not want, and therefore get exactly that. Successful people, on the other hand, constantly keep their goals and ideals in mind. The recording was so powerful that it began to be distributed outside the company. Soon, The Strangest Secret became the first audio course in history to sell over 1 million copies, bringing Nightingale worldwide fame and making him a pioneer in the personal development industry. Earl Nightingale's story is direct evidence of how the method of substitution, focusing on the desired ideal, can transform a life from poverty to abundance and influence millions of people. Another giant in the field of personal development, Napoleon Hill, was also deeply inspired by the Master Key System. His legendary 20-year study of the principles of success began with a fateful meeting with Andrew Carnegie, one of the wealthiest men of his time, in 1908. Carnegie, impressed by the young journalist, offered Hill an unprecedented opportunity to interview 500 of America's most successful people to identify the universal laws of achieving wealth and success. Among these people were such titans as Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Alexander Graham Bell, and many others. Hill dedicated 20 years of his life to this task, and the result was his bestseller, Think and Grow Rich, published in 1937. At the heart of all the principles Hill identified, from the definite chief aim to the power of the subconscious mind, lie ideas that echo Haanel's method of substitution. Hill asserted that every success begins with an idea, with a clear mental image of the desired outcome, which must then be reinforced by faith and constant focus. He taught that the subconscious mind does not distinguish between the real and the imaginary, and that by constantly feeding it images of abundance and success, a person programs themselves to achieve them. This is not a fight against poverty, but the creation of a mental equivalent of wealth. Napoleon Hill, in essence, expanded and popularized Haanel's principles, demonstrating them through the lives of the greatest entrepreneurs and inventors, proving that conscious shaping of one's inner world is the key to outer success. Moving to more contemporary figures, one cannot fail to mention Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, whose vision and innovations changed the world of technology. Although Jobs did not directly quote Haanel, his philosophy of life and creativity deeply resonates with the method of substitution. In his famous commencement address at Stanford University in 2005, Jobs told the story of how his fascination with calligraphy in Reed College, seemingly useless for his future, later became critically important for the creation of the first Macintosh. He explained that at Reed he dropped out of college but stayed on campus, attending only the courses he liked. One of them was a calligraphy class, where he learned the art of beautiful typography, studying various typefaces and the subtleties of typesetting. 10 years later, when he was designing the Macintosh, all this knowledge resurfaced in his consciousness. It was thanks to this experience that the Mac became the first computer with beautiful fonts, which became one of its distinguishing features. Jobs concluded, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward, so you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever." This philosophy of connecting the dots is in essence the practice of focusing on positive experiences, on developing one's interests and passions, even if their immediate usefulness is unclear. It is a belief that by cultivating the desirable, beauty, knowledge, skills, you create seeds for future success, even without knowing exactly how they will sprout. It is not fighting uncertainty about the future, but focusing on developing oneself in the present, believing in an ideal outcome. And of course, Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential women in the world, openly acknowledges the influence of the Master Key system on her life and career. Oprah, who herself rose from poverty and numerous hardships to create a media empire and billionaire status, has always been a proponent of the power of positive thinking and self-development. She has repeatedly mentioned the Master Key system in her shows and interviews, recommending it to her audience as a book that helped her understand that she is the creator of her reality. Oprah recounted how this book helped her realize that her thoughts and beliefs directly shape her experience. She understood that instead of fighting past traumas or current difficulties, she should focus on what she wanted to create in her life, on abundance, love, success, and service. Her ability to overcome obstacles, build successful relationships, and create content that inspires millions is living proof of Haanel's principles. Oprah Winfrey, in essence, applies the method of substitution on a global level, using her platform to spread ideas about the power of consciousness, about how every person is capable of transforming their life by focusing on the ideal and believing in their limitless possibilities. The stories of Earl Nightingale, Napoleon Hill, Steve Jobs, and Oprah Winfrey are not just tales of success. They are living illustrations of how the principles outlined by Charles Haanel in his 17th lesson can be applied in real life to achieve outstanding results. They show that the method of substitution is not just an esoteric concept, but a powerful, time-tested, and experience-confirmed tool for creating desired reality. It calls us not to fight shadows, but to light our own light, knowing that this very light will dispel all darkness. This method, which Oprah Winfrey and other titans of modernity have transformed into the foundation of their being, finds its deepest resonance in the analytical psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. Jung, working in the same decades when Charles Haanel was formulating his laws, came to a striking conclusion that today echoes the 17th lesson. What you resist does not merely stay with you, it intensifies. In his concept of individuation, Jung indicated that direct struggle with the dark aspects of the psyche, which he called the shadow, only imbues them with additional energy. Instead of trying to eradicate one's weaknesses through denial, Jung proposed a process of integration and transformation. He taught that the light of consciousness should be directed towards the creation of a new wholeness, where lower impulses are not suppressed, but replaced by higher goals. This is the psychological equivalent of Haanel's method of substitution. We do not expend energy on destroying the darkness in the basement of our mind. We open windows on the upper floors, allowing the sunlight of the ideal to fill the entire space. When we consider the ideas of Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, we see the same principle elevated to the rank of a life strategy. Maslow introduced the concept of peak experiences, moments of supreme happiness and harmony when a person feels at one with the world. He observed that people who reach the level of self-actualization do not spend time fighting minor deficiencies in their character. They are so focused on realizing their potential, on their highest ideal, that negative states simply lose their power over them. Maslow effectively confirmed Haanel's words that focusing on the ideal as an already existing fact is the shortest path to mental health. For the self-actualizing individual, the ideal is not a distant dream. It is a living reality that dictates every action in the present. Modern cognitive science, in the person of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, offers us to look at this process through the prism of the work of two systems of thinking. System 1 is our automatic, emotional, and often irrational mind, where fears and habitual negative reactions reside. System 2 is slow, logical, conscious thinking. Haanel's method of substitution is, in essence, a masterful use of System 2 to gradually reprogram System 1. When you consciously choose a thought of courage in a moment of fear, you engage the prefrontal cortex to suppress amygdala activity. Kahneman showed how susceptible we are to cognitive biases, and Haanel's method acts as a conscious tool for correcting these biases. Instead of allowing System 1 to fixate on a catastrophic scenario, you, by an act of will, introduce an alternative, ideal image into the field of consciousness, gradually accustoming your brain to a new track of thinking. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the creator of flow theory, describes a state that is the ideal embodiment of the method of substitution in action. In a state of flow, a person is so absorbed in an activity that their ego, with all its fears, doubts, and inner criticism, simply disappears. In this state, there is no room for fighting negativity, because all mental space is occupied by the creative process. Haanel urged us to make this state of flow a constant backdrop of our lives. When you are focused on the ideal, you enter the flow of creating your reality. And in this powerful movement, any obstacles and negative states are washed away, like small debris from the channel of a full-flowing river. In the world of professional sports, this principle has become the dividing line between merely talented athletes and legends. Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time, in the documentary The Last Dance and numerous interviews, emphasized that he never focused on the possibility of missing. His mind was occupied exclusively with the trajectory of the ball entering the basket. He did not fight the fear of defeat. He substituted it with absolute confidence in the winning shot. Kobe Bryant and his famous Mamba mentality were built on the same foundation. Bryant consciously constructed his ideal image of a player and lived in it every second of practice and games. He did not expend energy on thoughts of fatigue or pain. He substituted them with the image of perfect execution of the task. For these athletes, the method of substitution was not a philosophical concept, but a daily tool for survival and dominance. In the realm of global business, we see the same principles in figures like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. Bezos, with his Day One concept, always insisted that the company maintain the energy and focus of a startup, regardless of its size. He does not fight bureaucracy as an enemy. He substitutes it with a culture of customer obsession. Elon Musk, using the first principles method, discards all existing industry limitations and fears, focusing on the ideal physical possibility of achieving a task, be it colonizing Mars or transitioning to electric propulsion. They do not try to improve the old by fighting its shortcomings. They create the new, based on an ideal vision, and the old simply atrophies for lack of need. Warren Buffett, with his inner scorecard, demonstrates how substituting external approval with an internal ideal of honesty and professionalism creates an unshakable financial empire. The scientific substantiation of these processes became possible thanks to discoveries in neuroplasticity. Norman Doidge, in his fundamental work, The Brain That Changes Itself, published in 2007, proved that our thoughts physically change the structure of the brain. Each time you apply the method of substitution, you literally lay down new neural highways. Old pathways associated with fear and lack, over time, atrophy due to disuse, a process called synaptic pruning. You are not just thinking differently, you are rewiring your biological computer. Bruce Lipton, in the field of epigenetics, went even further, showing that our beliefs and mental states can influence gene expression. Focusing on the ideal of health, in essence, sends chemical signals to your cells, triggering processes of repair and growth. Quantum physics also offers us fascinating parallels. Alain Aspect's experiments in 1982 confirmed the phenomenon of quantum entanglement, proving that particles remain connected at any distance. If the world is fundamentally unified and interconnected, then the thought of a creative ideal is not something isolated within your head. It is part of a unified quantum field. Haanel intuitively understood this when he wrote about the universal mind. Your focus on the ideal is not just a psychological exercise. It is an active interaction with the very fabric of reality, where the observer and the observed are inextricably linked. However, in mastering this powerful tool, it is necessary to be aware of the dangers inherent in its incorrect application. There is a subtle but critically important line between the method of substitution and what modern critics call naive positivism, or toxic spirituality. Charles Haanel never advocated ignoring reality or fleeing from problems. The danger lies in the fact that a person may begin to use positive thoughts as a screen to hide deep psychological traumas or objective difficulties from themselves that require immediate action. This phenomenon, known as spiritual bypassing, leads not to transformation, but to the accumulation of inner tension. Magical thinking is another trap on this path. This is the belief that thoughts alone are enough to change the world without physical effort. Haanel emphasized that thought is the primary cause, but it must manifest through action. If you replace the thought of poverty with the thought of abundance, but remain a passive observer of your life, you violate the law of harmony. The true method of substitution gives you the energy and clarity for actions that correspond to your new ideal. Denying reality is not substitution, it is lying to oneself. A true master of Haanel's system recognizes the existence of a problem, but refuses to give it his mental energy, directing it instead towards a solution and an ideal outcome. Toxic positivity makes people feel guilty for their natural negative emotions. But, as Daniel Wegner's White Bear experiment showed, trying to simply suppress a thought or feeling leads to its obsessive return. Haanel's method is not suppression. It is the art of switching. When you feel fear, you do not tell yourself, "I should not be afraid." You acknowledge, "I am feeling fear right now, but I choose to focus on courage." This is an act of will, not an act of violence against your psyche. Without this understanding, the practice can turn into an exhausting internal war that will only deplete your resources. For the 17th lesson to become your living reality, Haanel offers a concrete 30-day transformation program. These are not just exercises, they are a process of reprogramming your consciousness, requiring discipline and utmost honesty with yourself. The first technique is the practice of the silence. Starting on day 1, dedicate 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening to complete stillness. Sit in a quiet place, relax your body, and simply observe the flow of your thoughts without judging them. This is the foundation. You must learn to notice the moment a negative thought arises before it takes hold of you. Without this skill of awareness, the method of substitution will be impossible. By day 7, you will begin to feel a strange distance between yourself and your automatic reactions. This is the first sign that your inner freedom has begun to grow. The second technique is working with a list of 3 fears. In the second week of practice, write down the 3 main fears or deficiencies that are poisoning your life today. This could be fear of poverty, fear of loneliness, or fear of illness. For each of them, define a clear, shining antithesis. Instead of lack, abundance. Instead of loneliness, deep connection and love. Instead of illness, vibrant vitality. Write these ideals on a separate sheet and carry it with you. Each time the shadow of an old fear touches your mind, immediately take out this sheet and for 2 minutes intensely visualize the corresponding ideal. You must not just think about it, you must taste it, smell it, and feel its emotional weight. The third technique is mental rehearsal, inspired by the methods of great athletes. Starting on day 10, allocate 10 minutes a day to vividly experience your ideal day 1 year from now. But do this in the present tense. I am walking through my office. I feel confident. I see the smiles of my partners. I feel the weight of tasks completed and the joy of success. This should be a kinesthetic experience. You are training your neural networks to expect this outcome as inevitable. By day 15, you will notice that your behavior in real situations has begun to change. You will start making decisions from the state of this future ideal self. The fourth technique is the turning point. This is the practice of instantaneously shifting focus in the thick of events. As soon as you catch yourself complaining, criticizing, or doubting, say to yourself, "Stop," and immediately replace that thought with an affirmation of your ideal. For example, "I don't have money for this" becomes "I am in the process of attracting resources for this purpose." This is not self-deception. It is choosing a direction of movement. You do this as many times a day as necessary. By day 20, this will become an automatic habit, and you will find that your threshold of flourishing, as Barbara Fredrickson spoke of, has begun to shift towards sustained growth. The fifth technique is a gratitude journal as a tool for substitution. Each evening, write down 5 events of the day that confirm the presence of your ideal in reality, even if they are tiny signs. If your ideal is abundance, write down a coin found or a discount at a store. If it is health, write down a minute of deep breathing without pain. By focusing attention on these crumbs, you compel your brain to seek them everywhere. This is using the brain's reticular activating system to filter reality in your favor. By day 25, you will be amazed at how much evidence of your success has always been around you. You just did not notice it. The sixth technique is affirmative visualization before sleep. In those liminal minutes as you fall asleep, your subconscious mind is most open. During this time, do not allow a single thought about the problems of the past day. Visualize your ideal as an accomplished fact. Let the last image before falling asleep be your face, radiant with the realization that the goal has been achieved. This sets a working program for your subconscious mind for all 7 or 8 hours of sleep. The seventh technique is the master key breath. Connect the process of substitution with your breathing. On the inhale, imagine taking in the qualities of your ideal: strength, calmness, wisdom. On the exhale, imagine releasing old forms of thinking, not fighting them, but simply allowing them to go. Do this for 5 minutes at any time of day when you feel stress. By day 30, these practices will merge into the single rhythm of your life. Charles Haanel concludes the 17th lesson with a reminder that should become your inner compass. The law of substitution is the only path to true liberation, because it works in harmony with nature, not against it. You cannot scoop darkness out of a room with a bucket. You can only bring light into it. Your consciousness is a temple, and only you decide which deities will reside within it. If you fill it with images of perfection, there will simply be no room for imperfection. The entire meaning of the 17th lesson can be summed up in one phrase: your reality is not what happens to you, but what you choose to focus on at any given moment. This is the greatest power given to man, and at the same time his greatest responsibility. You are no longer a victim of circumstances, no longer a hostage to your heredity or upbringing. You are an architect who right now, by the power of your thought, is erecting the building of your future. In the next lesson, we will go even further. We will explore the law of attraction not as a popular slogan, but as a precise mathematical calculation of energy distribution in space. We will learn how to make your thoughts so magnetic that desired events begin to seek encounters with you themselves. And for now, remember, in the silence of your mind, at the very moment you choose a thought of love instead of a thought of anger, or a thought of possibility instead of a thought of limitation, a miracle occurs. In that moment, you turn the master key in the lock of your destiny, and the door that seemed forever locked begins to slowly and silently open, letting in the dazzling light of a world where your ideal has long since become reality. You are simply returning home, to that state of greatness that has always been yours by right of birth. Look to the light, be the light, and the darkness will vanish on its own, as if it had never been.